turning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Let's go down to the Kennedy Space Center and take a look at Challenger sitting on the pad.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
So the 25th Space Shuttle mission is now on the way after more delays than NASA cares to count. This morning it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Looks like a couple of the solid rocket boosters blew away from the side of the shuttle in an explosion.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
We're awaiting word. They're holding their breath just, I'm sure, as everyone else is. In the center of the fire and the smoke, you can't see any form of what was once the shuttle. You saw it just a few moments ago, about 45 seconds after liftoff, a huge fireball in the sky.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Everything else.
He's leaving.
Stand by to voice over this picture. Shut up in here! Open their mics.
Open all their mics.
Talk, folks.
Yeah, Gorilla Zero team. He's staying with the solid Can you get to the airport in time to just meet that plane and say, get back on the plane with tickets?
Whoever isn't necessary right now in the air, please move back into the pit.
Graphics, I need pictures of the crew, please. They only got 3.
My job began just at the time that this tragic accident occurred, and I was not permitted to have emotional feelings about it. I will have those later. I had to represent this network in doing the things that it is expected to do.
A long way from history, but responsible for making sure that we covered it, and sad. Little prayer.
Usually the night before, I had the same nightmare that what I saw today, and I thought it was a dream. I was speechless for a few minutes, and I knew that that explosion shouldn't have happened when it did, and I was holding my breath, and I crossed my fingers as I always do right before the launch. And when I saw the fireball in the sky, I knew no one could have survived that. It's gotta be the toughest thing I've ever done in my life.
In the issue of the kind of dilemma that NASA got itself of increasing committals in an environment of dwindling resources, to quote Mr. Armstrong, is NASA the innocent victim, or to what extent might this have been a deliberate NASA bureaucratic strategy, as it were, to drive funds from the Congress by deliberately overcommitting and overextending in order to drive funds that were obviously necessary to meet the commitments which had been made without cost levels being known to the Congress?
I was not an employee of NASA during any of the years in question and cannot speak from personal experience. I think it would be improper for me to try to make a judgment in that area.
The gentleman from New Jersey mentioned that a number of people have signed a bill appropriating funds for the beginning of a replacement Challenger shuttle type of vehicle, without questioning the validity and the continuing need for a Challenger shuttle orbiter program. Would it be prudent in your mind to commit these kinds of funds for a replacement or new vehicle until the fundamental questions posed and recommendations in your report are resolved, and above and beyond policy issues which your report raises, which in many respects are beyond the purview of the Commission relative to the role of expendable launch vehicles in meeting mission demands as opposed to shuttle orbiters? I'm just wondering whether each of you would give me, at least I guess you can't perhaps speak for the Commission, but individually, what your judgment would be on the wisdom of appropriating funds for a new Challenger until those fundamental programmatic policy issues are resolved.
I want to just answer your question, if I may, first. I don't think we should make any judgments on a fourth orbiter, because that was not our job, and I don't think we can disassociate ourselves from the Commission. The reason you're having us here this morning is because we're on the Commission, and I want to try as much as possible to be sure that we speak as a Commission, not as individuals, and we think that role is one that should be performed by Congress, not by this Commission.
Let me rephrase the question, because I think it's very critical given the kind of political climate that we face, and I think you're aware of that from looking at the history of the program, the public nature of the program, and which obviously has been one of the factors which got us to where we are, both in a positive sense and a negative sense, but generally a positive sense. It's been a very important issue here. And when we have this talk about being first in space, is it really irresponsible to suggest that commitments on a $3-4 billion replacement issue the commitments ought to be withheld until we've resolved some of these fundamental issues, which were inherent in some of the bureaucratic positioning that apparently was taking place in NASA to try to handle all launches, all roll missions in manned vehicles. The contest between NASA and the military as opposed to ELVs and manned shuttles. Aren't these policy issues that ought to be resolved before we pre-resolve them by committing vast resources and money?
Well, I don't think we necessarily have to do it in that time frame. I think that the recommendations of the Commission can be put into effect fairly quickly. And I also agree that with your suggestion that some of these safety matters should be dealt with right away. I think that should be reassessment of the brakes and the tires and some of these other aspects, and I think that should be done. And if it requires more money, I think the money should be provided. The thing I do not want to get involved in is a decision about the fourth orbiter. That's a function I think Congress should perform. And I don't think the Commission is prepared to make a statement on that.
It's my understanding that roughly about 748 kinds of issues on the... Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Finish your question.
Thank you. There were some 748 issues on the Criticality 1 list that at one point the O-ring problem was on that list and was removed. And given some earlier comments you made that there are no known or discovered kind of safety flaws with the kind of marginal risk equivalent to that, how could it be that the one most outstanding criticality problem of the list of then 749, to speak metaphorically, that one item, the most critical, should be removed from the list?
We can't answer that, really.
It was not, sir. It was, permit me to
Sure.
make a technical correction. It was removed from the launch constraint list rather than the criticality 1. It was waived from the launch constraint list. It was not removed from the criticality 1. It was moved from criticality 1R to 1, properly so.
The night before the launch, Beaujolais repeated his warning.
But with the previous shuttle having just set a record for delays, NASA's leaders were impatient.
Beaujolais' bosses told NASA the O-ring evidence in the memo was inconclusive. Challenger's launch was ordered. A puff of black smoke at liftoff was the ominous sign that Beaujolais was right. The O-rings had already failed. The smoke appeared when they burned. After a few seconds, a jet of flame appeared. A post-accident report by NASA described it with passionless precision.
The plume is seen here impinging directly onto the surface of the external tank and the lower aft strut at 60.248 seconds.
The sideways flame burned like a welder's torch through the gap left by the blown O-rings. It pierced the giant orange fuel tank, and fuel began streaming out. Still, no one knew anything was wrong. Not until Challenger, its astronauts, and its teacher in space had flown for 73 seconds.
At 73.191 seconds, a flash was observed between the ET and orbiter that was immediately followed by the start of total vehicle breakup at 73.213 seconds. During the next 100 milliseconds, additional flashes occur in the SRB forward attach area. As the ET broke up, the released fluids vaporized rapidly, producing an expanding cloud of gases, vapors, and cryogenic fluid with embedded debris and localized combustion of mixed gases. No shock wave or other evidence of a violent explosion was detected in the imagery. Illumination from a combination of SRB plume radiance, reflected sunlight, and peripheral burning of gases gives the cloud the appearance of a fireball. By 73.6 seconds, the main engines were in automatic shutdown mode as a result of reduced propellant pressures. The last telemetry from Challenger was received 73.618 seconds after launch. The actual vehicle breakup was essentially obscured from view by the vapor cloud which abruptly enveloped the vehicle. Hundreds of fragments were noted exiting the ET cloud. Those identified included the shuttle main engines, the left wing, crew cabin, and both SRBs.
What was happening to the crew at this moment? They were still alive.
Challenge is fast. Launch is fast. It's bang, and then it's a 2-minute ride down. And you're conscious, we know that.
Astronaut Story Musgrave told me the crew survived in that white cloud. It was Challenger's fuel tank that exploded. The shuttle itself just broke apart. The crew compartment with its 7 living occupants was intact.
The initial path of the crew cabin from the vapor cloud carried it across the path of an adjacent contrail, clearly revealing its truncated form and attitude. The left wing became visible at 78.531 seconds. The main engines and crew cabin are also identifiable.
It took 2 minutes and 45 seconds for the crew cabin to hit the water. The impact speed was 207 miles an hour. A NASA statement released after the accident reads, "The forces to which the crew were exposed during orbiter breakup were probably not sufficient to cause death or serious injury." And later, NASA is unable to determine positively the cause of death of the Challenger astronauts, but has established that it is possible but not certain that the loss of consciousness did occur in the seconds following the orbiter breakup. Musgrave, who is a medical doctor and surgeon, is quite certain.
You died when you hit the water. You know that.
You think so? That's always been controversial.
I don't know, sir. There's nothing controversial about that. No. It's hard evidence. Yeah, you died when you hit the water.
At the bottom of the ocean, investigators found that some of the crew's emergency oxygen masks had been turned on. Said another astronaut, Scobie fought for any and every edge to survive. He flew that ship without wings all the way down. They were alive.
You could have lost consciousness at that altitude if it depressurized for a little while, but then, no, there's all kinds of evidence that you died when you hit the water.
Is NASA the innocent victim, or To what extent might this have been a deliberate NASA bureaucratic strategy, as it were?
Nunca se ve bailando en la pista sola. Llega a montarla con sus amigas gastando el dólar. Me dice peso, ¿qué será lo que tiene esa morra? La conozco de antes, es una experta rompiendo el cora. Ella es peligrosa, una bomba nuclear. Ese está a punto de estallar. ¿Qué hay para dañar? Y si ella quiere le explota, plata, 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 plata. Le gusta cantar el coro, coro.
Bureaucratic strategy, as it were.